Hey everyone, welcome back to Doom Productions, home of the No Budget Film School. And today we're going to do something a little different. We're talking about writing, but I saw a few comments, I think one or two, I think it was just one person, who wanted to see kind of a writing session or a writing process. Thought that was a great idea. And so I thought, a few videos ago, and if you've seen my other writing videos, I talked about my process of writing's kind of like sculpting. And I kind of write in stages where it's come up with the idea, I come up with the what's it called, the beat sheet, and I come up with the outline, then the scriptment, and then the script, then the first draft. And I thought it'd be really fun to go through this with you all, and so you can just sit down with me. It'll be kind of a longer video, kind of more rambly video of me just sitting down with me as I write. You can see my computer screen. Just me, got my covers, or I'm doing laundry and everything, and yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess, but this is what writing looks like. It's not like sitting there in a coffee shop looking like you're that thinking man statue and you're crafting gold. I mean, this is what it looks like. You're in your PJs, you are you're in your house. You don't have a lot of time. You got noise in the background. And so this is, we're going to write. Today, we're just going to go through, you're going to sit with me as I go through the beat sheet process. Then I think I'll do a new video for each kind of thing. And probably once I get to the scriptment and the script phase, it might be more like doing one scene or a couple scenes with me. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I hope you can learn from this. Without further ado, let's just dive right in. So the idea for this movie is Mr. Fiddle. Now, this is some deep cut kind of knowledge. Essentially, the idea is Mr. Fiddle is a statue who stays, he kind of possesses people. He's not like Chucky, but he's like a toy statue who is evil and turns people evil, and it's kind of very campy, very goofy, but so is a lot of the rest of our work. But if you're interested in a short kind of serialized version of Mr. Fiddle, check out the older videos on our channel. We have Mr. Fiddle, I think 3 and 4 for sure are up there. We might have taken some off, but I can't remember. But for sure, Mr. Fiddle episode 3 and 4 on our channel. Check them out. You don't need to see the first two necessarily. It's kind of self-contained. But yeah, Ethan and I have always wanted to revisit that idea in a feature. And there actually has been a couple of different feature-length scripts written for Mr. Fiddle. And we probably will do it in the future at some point. I'm not going to spoil anything because this is just what I'm feeling now. Every time I approach this movie, something different changes, but some things stay the same. So it might spoil a little bit, probably won't spoil a whole lot, especially not this stage, especially at the beat sheet, which is just the broad strokes. But, if we do make this script in the future, hey, it's like, you're here for the genesis. So this is day one of writing it. So we might make the script, we might not. I don't know. So yeah, let's that's kind of our little disclaimer here for what's going on. But let's get into it. So first thing, I'll title it. I like to bold and center the text there. Mr. Fiddle, that's the title. There might be a little subheading later on, but we'll come there when we get there. Act 1. All right. So remember, a beat sheet is only just a few sentences for the whole thing, really, for your whole movie. So the setup. The setup is going to be the status quo. It is the normal, everyday world. And let's see. In the previous movies, it's been... So it might help, actually, if you go back and watch our old shorts, but if you don't, that's totally cool. But in the other shorts, which we really love, it's about friends and friendship. And it's typically been me and Ethan since the very beginning, but we've also had other people jump in and out. So I think it's going to be a group of friends. I like writing with 4 people. Now, as a no-budget filmmaker, I'm also thinking, who can I get for real? And who are real people that we know, who are actors who can do this stuff. So sometimes, it's hard to separate yourself from the production side of things, but I'm just going to figure this out right now, my ideal version of this. And that is, let's see, Ethan, Jordan, and Who are two friends that have been our stuff? Okay, so May, who is going to be in our next feature film, which I'm super excited to work with them. And Morgan. Morgan she was in Doom on the Doorstep and My Father Was Spaceman. Check him out. She's awesome. Our friends. And it looks like this is bolded too. I don't want that. So, we're friends. Good times, good times. So then the setup will be, oops. I always click around. What? There we go. Okay. Status quo, then something happens. Something big that changes the world. Or it can be little, doesn't matter. So in this one, oh geez. Sorry, I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to formatting. For myself anyways. Doesn't matter how you do it. I mean, because you're the only one who's going to see this. Maybe other friends, other filmmakers and collaborators, but really all this page needs to do is make sense for you. This is what makes sense for me. So turning point 1, obviously that's when Mr. Fiddle shows up. And then we're in a new stage. So new situation. And kind of how I describe this, which might be a bad analogy, but so right here we have the status quo, right? This is a stage. And then something happens. This is an event. And then this is the new status quo, right? So, you know, the world is blue right here. Setup, stage 1. The world is blue. Then we add red. Someone pours red into the world. Now the world is purple. That's the new situation. So this is always, you know, this might be a long video, but you know, this is real time. That's the intent. So as I'm thinking out loud, what I'm thinking is we've seen, obviously Mr. Fiddle, we've seen these kind of movies where there's a mystical thing that arrives, an object or a thing or a person. And what that thing does is they give the characters something that they want, that they don't realize is bad for them. So Mr. Fiddle shows up, and he's got magic. He's magical, and the characters think it's really cool. Or he grants wishes. That might be kind of interesting. So then the gang, I'll just call them the gang because I don't want to list out, you know, everybody each time. The gang, I don't know, how do you phrase this? I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the gang is happy. They're like, oh my gosh, we got this cool doll thing that can do anything we want. We have powers. So the gang celebrates with Mr. Fiddle. And I say celebrate, but I don't actually mean a party necessarily. I mean like the good times are rolling. You know what I mean? And you know what, just to give it a little bit dynamic, so maybe the thing is they are moving away for college. So it's the gang, but they're going to be broken up. And so that way, when Mr. Fiddle shows up, you know, things are kind of depressing here. Then a good thing happens, and now it's good times. They plan to, see, it's so campy and so ridiculous, but again, this is just like really goofy. This is like Blazing Saddles or a cartoon or something. So they plan to use Mr. Fiddle magic to keep the gang together. Now, how do you use magic to keep friends from moving away to college? Doesn't really matter at this point in the beat sheet. Once I get to the outline, that's when I'm going to start thinking those things through. But just for now, it doesn't really matter because it's just the emotional moments that you want to hit. Turning point 2. Okay. So then this is when poop hits the fan pretty much. This is when, like, you know, another sudden change that kicks us off and pushes us on our story. So, you know, I'm thinking out loud, I'm wondering what could ramp stuff up. So obviously this is probably where Mr. Fiddle turns evil, or it's revealed to be evil. Mr. Fiddle is revealed to be evil. But if one of the problems I'm thinking about too is that if Mr. Fiddle is evil and the gang knows that he's evil, why is he still hanging around? And so now I'm thinking in my head, well, maybe it's just one person who wants to use the magic to keep the gang together. So maybe it's Ethan. Maybe Ethan is like, I don't want to split up the gang. I can't deal with this. And now that's Ethan's arc that I've just realized. So Ethan in the beginning, he's going to want to keep them together. And he's like, we can't be broken up. We're best friends. The four of us, we're the gang. And I refuse to accept otherwise. Mr. Fiddle shows up, is like, here's your wish. You can have that. So Ethan's like, I'm going to use the magic to keep us all together. And the gang is like, nah. Or no, maybe the gang is... Maybe Ethan, because again, we're not thinking too much details, but you get ideas for scenes. So maybe the gang is thinking like, maybe Ethan tells just Jordan. Maybe he tells just me about that plan. Or it's not a huge thing, but that's kind of his intentions right there. Mr. Fiddle's revealed to be evil. Oh, okay. So then here's what it is. The gang decides to get rid of him. Ba-ba-bum. So maybe there's a scene where like Mr. Fiddle's like, I'm gonna possess you all. I'm gonna take over the world and your bodies, and you're gonna be my minions. And the gang's like, well, let's just throw him away. Let's get rid of him. So they put him in the trash, and then Ethan's like, wait a minute. If we get rid of Mr. Fiddle, I'm not gonna get my wish. I'm gonna lose my friends, and we're not gonna be together. So then, but Ethan fishes him out of the trash. And I'll make this make more sense. The gang throws him away. All right. So, oops, why did I paste that? So, progress. So this is the main thing of the movie. This is the meat. This is where a lot of people get stuck. And usually, if you don't plan it out, or if this is what I found, is you're in the script writing process. So you just jump into the script, and you get a great setup for the rest of the movie, and then you get stuck in Act 2. So, and to be honest, I'm kind of feeling that over now. I don't know where you can go from here, but let's figure this out. So, progress. So the way I kind of think of this is, actually, I'll show this to you. Turning point 3. Complications. Higher stakes. So the way I think about this, and then turning point number 4. So the way I think about it is there's going to be, ignore those S's. That's just placeholder stuff right now. 3 things happen for the progress. 3 kind of big events, moving the story in one progression. So we're in this new status quo right now. There's a goal that the characters are trying to get to, and they're working towards that. So 3 things need to happen for it in order for that to happen. Then there's the midpoint. This is the point of no return. This is, further. This is, that moment in, what's the movie I could think of? I'm so bad at applying this to other movies. This is like in Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man movie, where Peter's like, oh, the Green Goblin knows who I am. I think that's the midpoint, or is it not? I don't know. Oh my gosh, I'm so bad at this. But it's essentially something big that happens that ups the stakes even more. So now there's something at stake. Again, this is traditional Hollywood formatting, so this might not be applicable to all of your stories and the films that you all want to make, but that's totally fine. For for right now, because this is just this story. Every movie's different. And then that'll be the end of Act 2. But we'll get there when we get there. So, for this movie, what should these 3 things be? And actually, there'll be 3 things down here, too. Again, ignore these little random things. So, usually what I try to think of is I like to think of what's the midpoint and what's the low point. So that's what turning point 4 is. That's like the most devastating, like what's the worst thing that could happen to your characters, and that's when it happens right there. That's when they're at their lowest. That's what propels them to their lowest low. So I like to think in terms of these moments and shoot to those moments. So that way it's kind of like you have goals that you're working towards, and it kind of gives you more clear path. Because if you just wander into a forest and you don't know where your goal is, you're going to get lost. But if you know, like, oh, I got a map, I know I want to get to that tree right there, so I'm going to make a map and I'll go that way. That's kind of how I think about it. So the low point is usually the easiest to figure out. So it seems so far Ethan he's going to have the emotional arc in this movie. That's just what makes more sense to me right now. This could change, especially when we go to the outline and all that stuff. So let's say Mr. Fiddle, let's say Ethan gets what he wants. But Mr. Fiddle tricks him. So Mr. Fiddle, let's say he kidnaps. He kidnaps Ethan's friends. So Ethan is totally without, he's like, oh my gosh, I thought I wanted this, but at what cost? That kind of thing. Okay. Let's see. So obviously, knowing that, so Ethan is going to be all in for Mr. Fiddle through this. See, this is also what writing looks like. It's a lot of silence, just staring at your keyboard, just being like, huh? So, now, maybe, so Mr. Fiddle, for the turning point 2, I'm thinking Mr. Fiddle, maybe this is when he attacks the gang. So here, Mr. Fiddle is dangerous. Or like he's like creepy and weird. But they're like, oh, he's just a doll. Here is where we're like, oh, wait a minute. Mr. Fiddle, he can do stuff. So maybe he's got powers. Maybe he could float furniture, stuff like that. And you know what? Sometimes too with this process is you realize things might work better at different moments. So my turning point here, Mr. Fiddle revealed to be evil. That's kind of that could be a good midpoint just as well. Maybe that happens a little too fast in this current outline. So then you move things down. Gee, I don't know. See, I wish I was doing this live so you all could like interact. Because again, we're thinking, because this is a goofy comedy, we're thinking very traditional kind of structure. Yeah. So let's see. I felt so smart because I've been spending this whole time like on a roll. But now, again, Act 2 is tricky. I'm not going to fault anyone for not, I would never be like, ha, you don't know how to do Act 2, it's easy, blah, 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 because it's not easy. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's still hard for me. So sometimes if I can't figure out Act 2, maybe I figure out where my end point is. So turning point number 5, and then aftermath. Turning point number 5 is the climax. And I know what the climax has got to be. It's got to be The gang defeats, this is so stupid, but defeats Mr. Fiddle with the power of friendship. Yes, I went there, and I'm telling you right now that when we make this movie for real, that is going to be the climax. Because why shouldn't it be? So obviously it's the gang coming together. The gang is like, we're in this. So maybe it's not just Ethan's friends. Mr. Fiddle sends the gang to the... I don't know if this... No, this is not in our short films. But there was an idea we had for Mr. Fiddle where he came from this universe called the Fiddle Space, which is kind of like his dimension, his like prison dimension. Think of like the Phantom Zone in Superman, you know? So it's kind of like that. So now that I know that turning point number 4, that Mr. Fiddle's like, haha, I tricked you. I'm going to send you to the Phantom Zone pretty much. I know the final push, which is like how they get out of the low point. I know that's the gang's probably going to argues. Ethan expresses, this is like his big emotional moment where he's like, guys, I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to be alone forever. So Ethan apologizes. I mean, this is all, you know, he's like, I'm sorry for getting us in this mess. And tells his friends how much he loves them. And then his friends agree. They accept the apology. And then you could have a scene where they're like, well, if we're trapped in here forever, at least we're trapped together. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. My camera just ran out of battery right when I was recording. So, let's see. Press record. There we go. Okay, so I think where I was I was saying that it makes me think of the SpongeBob SquarePants movie here. The idea that the gang would defeat him with the power of friendship. The idea that friendship saves them from the Phantom Zone thing. I picture like their tears or something, you know, in SpongeBob movie that saves Patrick and SpongeBob from dying. I envision a similar thing here, but again, we don't really need those details right now. Just the gang argues. Ethan will be like, I'm sorry, guys, I didn't mean to upset you, and I didn't mean to get us trapped. And they're like, okay, yeah, we accept it. If we're stuck here, at least we're, you know, here together. And then some supernatural friendship thing would happen. Get them free. So they get banished to the Fiddle Space. So maybe, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's an ultimatum. Mr. Fiddle gives Ethan an ultimatum. He's like, join me and you can be with your friends with forever, or don't, you know? So maybe Ethan's arc isn't actually that strong throughout. Maybe that's not the driving force behind it, but that's just a little thing that's there, and then it becomes kind of the main thing. So Ethan, game throws him away. So maybe it's like, you know, while they're... So I'm kind of jumping all over the place in terms of what I'm envisioning for different scenes and moments, but that's kind of how doing a beat sheet is you kind of, or at least I do, I jump all around. So now, so here's what I'm envisioning. The turning point in Act 4, or not Act 4, turning point number 4, just before Act 3. So maybe, you know, the gang will destroy Mr. Fiddle. The gang is about to destroy Mr. Fiddle. So maybe they got him pinned down or something. They're about to kill him. They have a spell book that they printed off from online, and they're like, okay, we need everyone to work together. Kind of like in Avengers Infinity War, when they're all going to pull the glove off of Thanos' hands. But it's Peter Quill who's like the one guy who messes it up, and that's Ethan right here. So Mr. Fiddle's like tempting him, and he's like, hey, join me and you'll be with your friends forever. And everyone's like, don't listen to him, Ethan. We'll still always be friends, blah, 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 blah. You know, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what I'm envisioning. But again, that's not a huge thing going throughout. So maybe Ethan doesn't fish him out of the trash here. So maybe he just appears. Mr. Fiddle reappears. They think it's normal. And actually, that probably makes sense for this. So, for Act 2, and that actually doesn't make sense right there. See, again, now you know, you go back and forth a whole bunch. So now I'm thinking, actually, so, hear me out. As if you're there talking to me. So maybe weird stuff happens, all right? So maybe you're not sure what's going on. So maybe like there's a scene where the friends are all sitting down, they're about to eat breakfast, and they all drink coffee and then they spit it out because there's worms in the coffee. Or like no one can find the remote for the TV, so they can't figure out what to watch. And then they look and the remote's been like totally, it's like gone. Or like maybe the friends are all they're like in the backyard, and then May begins to float and they start floating up and they're like, hey, help me, I don't know what's going on, I'm being levitated. So maybe weird stuff happens. So maybe one weird thing happens here. Again, what that exactly it is, we don't know until the outline. One weird thing happens. Then it's kind of like the Scooby-Doo. They investigate. The friends investigate. They try to figure out what's going on and they think they find the bottom of it. But then more weird stuff happens. And maybe there's an undercurrent of like evilness to all this. So maybe they're getting visions of like worms and blood and gore and like all this horrible stuff. Very much like, I don't know, I'm picturing like, you know, like 2001 A Space Odyssey, right? Or like Clockwork Orange. It's not like the evil Alex DeLarge in Clockwork Orange where he's like, but it's like, this is a horrible, really violent analogy, but like, you know the guy when Alex is back at the house of the old guy in the wheelchair and the guy's remembering and he's just shaking. So maybe one of the friends is like getting visions of like evil things. And this friend is like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening. And they're scared by it or something like that. I'm picturing like weird stuff happening mixed with, you know, weird montages and stuff like that. So then more weird stuff happens. So the friends, now they're like, oh, it's not done. So the friends continue their investigation. And then Mr. Fiddle, that's when they're like, oh, he's evil. Like, we got to throw him away. And so that's when we get into the next stage of, so now Mr. Fiddle is, so kind of going back to the beginning, they're all friends, right? They're going to move away. Mr. Fiddle shows up and they're like celebrating together, right? And they're like, yay, this is awesome. Then weird stuff starts happening. Now they know it's Mr. Fiddle. That's Act 3. Or I'm sorry, Act 3. That's the midpoint. They're like, oh, Mr. Fiddle's evil. Now, the next stage is we got to get rid of Mr. Fiddle. So they try to throw Mr. Fiddle away, but he keeps coming back. Oops. Then they try to destroy him. And maybe there's a couple of attempts in here. Maybe they try to burn him. Then they try to set him on fire. Then they try to smash him. Then they try to, but he keeps coming back no matter what. So then that's when they, and you know what? I'll do this. But nothing works. Then the third thing that kind of happens is, okay, then this is like the plan. They research how to get rid of an evil doll and find a plan. Yeah. Again, super vague right now. We can fill in all those details later, but that's kind of the gist right now. And so all the through line through this, which it's not written in here. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't with little plot threads like this, but I know that throughout all of this, Ethan's gonna not be totally on board with getting rid of Mr. Fiddle because he knows that once they get rid of him, there are magical attempts to keep everyone together. And you know what? Maybe it's not even for college. Maybe they're just moving away. Maybe one of them is moving away. We don't know. They're magical attempts. I mean, they can't, like, after they get rid of, essentially it's a metaphor. Once they get rid of, Ethan feels like once they get rid of Mr. Fiddle, he's getting, like, the friendship is gone. So that's also kind of what's going on. And I'm aware of that. It doesn't need to be in the beat sheet, but I know it. And, you know, you can pretty much infer that from the turning point 4 and this next stage, the final push. But yeah, like plot-wise, that's just kind of what happens. So, going through, we already wrote all that stuff. Final push, the climax, they destroy Mr. Fiddle. Or maybe they just defeat him, we don't know. Maybe Mr. Fiddle turns good in the end. And then the aftermath. So then obviously, Ethan gets what he wants, right? But he realizes that it's not the way to do it. So then Ethan is at peace with moving away. Because what's the point of a movie without a lesson? Because the lesson here is like, you know, sometimes it's not, you know, you can still be friends with people, you know, when you're super far away, when it's long distance. And I think during the coronavirus and quarantine, yeah, we totally feel that. So that's what people in the other room making noise. So people are going to distracted. Sorry. Yeah. So that's kind of the message, if you want to call it that. That's the meaning. That's Ethan's arc, anyways. He goes from we have to stay together to oh, we are together, but we're trapped in the Phantom Zone pretty much. And then, you know what? It's okay for us to go our separate ways. We'll still always be friends regardless of being together. So yeah, that is how I do a beat sheet. That's my process. It's usually not over a period of 50 minutes or whatever. Usually sometimes it takes days to work on this stuff because it's just so tricky. Or sometimes I crank it out in 10 minutes. But yeah, that's the beat sheet. I hope that helped you all with your process and how to approach a beat sheet. Next time I do this, we'll do the outline. So that's filling in those little details here and there. And then, yeah, we'll go from there. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, about script writing in general, about no budget filmmaking in general, leave them down below and I'll be sure to answer them. But yeah, thank you for watching, everyone, and I will see you at the next video.